He's one of the most famous literary and film characters of all time, and he's always portrayed as the quintessential English gentleman. But what a lot of people don't realise is that he's Scottish. And I'm of course talking Bond. James Bond. Ian Fleming, who wrote Bond, has Scottish roots himself, and his great-grandfather, John Fleming, worked in a jute mill in Dundee. The family stayed in Dundee until Fleming's brilliantly named father, Valentine Fleming, a very successful banker, moved the family to London. It's all very Bond.
Although Fleming was brought up in England, largely, the Fleming family prided themselves on being Scots, and they would encourage the four boys, including Ian Fleming, to wear kilts, and they would visit Scotland, I think, most summers.
During the war, Fleming worked in the Naval Intelligence Division and had a pretty successful career. After that, he moved into journalism, and that's when he wrote Casino Royale in 1952. This is Bowness Motor Museum, home to Scotland's best Bond collection. There's so much great memorabilia here that I actually feel like I'm in the set of a Bond movie. In fact, the first Bond movie, Dr. No, in 1962, starred Edinburgh's own Sean Connery.
Originally, Fleming didn't like Sean Connery being cast in the role. He called him an overdeveloped stuntman, but he soon revised his opinion, particularly when the films did really well.
So, what about the man himself? Well, many believe Bond was based on the Scotsman, Sir Fitzroy Maclean. Professor Tony Pollard is an expert in conflict history, so I visited him at the University of Glasgow to hear his thoughts.
Fitzroy Maclean was born in Cairo in Egypt in 1911. And as a young man, as a boy, Fitzroy wanted to join the army. But at that time, there was no war, so I think Fitzroy was a bit worried it'd be a bit boring in the army in peacetime.
In 1933, Fitzroy was a diplomat in Paris. Maclean kept company with spies whilst enjoying lavish parties where the champagne flowed.
Tremendously glamorous, wonderfully interesting work, meeting a lot of exciting people and living in considerable style. Well, after 3 years of that, I thought it was time for a change.
They sent him to Moscow, where he learnt Russian. But what he also did while he was there was travel. And he had the Russian secret police, the NKVD, that later became the KGB, on his trail for most of the time, because here's this chap from Scotland running all over the Soviet Union. What was he up to? And there are times when he does appear to have been working for the British government.
You know, people were talking about Russia a lot then, as they are today. And I wanted to see it for myself.
During the war, he was involved in many daring exploits, but somehow he seemed immune to danger.
As a captain, he ended up in Egypt, the place of his birth. And it was in Egypt that a lot of special forces activity was beginning to take place. And a fellow Scot called David Stirling had recently set up a unit called the Special Air Service, now very famous as the SAS.
So then I happened to meet David Stirling, who said, I'm starting a thing called the Special Air Service Regiment, and would you like to join? I said, I'm on. Well, it was an exciting life, certainly.
He was known to use disguises and his knowledge of many different languages to trick his enemies. When Churchill needed to choose an ally in the fight for Yugoslavia, Fitzroy, with his experience of communism, was the man for the job.
When he's back in London, he's called in to Winston Churchill's office. The Germans have occupied Yugoslavia. Churchill parachutes Fitzroy into Yugoslavia to join the partisans under Tito, to get to know Tito and work out whether they are a viable option. He performed on the world stage. He had an impact on the formation of post-war Europe, and indeed, during the war, played a key role in seeing Nazism defeated. So I think we have a responsibility to remember him.
His bravery, intelligence and charm made his exploits the stuff of legend. Surely the basis for the world's most famous spy.
He knew Ian Fleming. He met him in Paris, and they would undoubtedly have bumped into one another through the war. Fitzroy never acknowledged or denied, basically, in classic secret agent style. He didn't say, yes I am, or no I'm not. But I think there's every chance, given the experience he'd already had by the time he knew Fleming, that Fleming was was an artist, he was a novelist, and he was borrowing left, right and centre. So I think there's every chance there's a bit of Fitzroy Maclean in James Bond.
I've heard it said, but that's as far as I'd prefer to go.
The Scots have claimed Bond as their own, and in many ways, Bond appeals to the idea of the Scottish devil-may-care adventurer who kind of cocks a snook at authority.
Bond was born in Switzerland, homeland of his mother Monique Delacroix, but his father Andrew Bond was born in Glencoe. And one of the franchise's most loved characters, Q, is based on a Glaswegian armourer named Geoffrey Boothroyd. Over the last 5 decades, Bond has reigned as one of the biggest movie franchises in the world. And now we know, Scotland made Bond.